Pass these around. Nancy, can you kind of give us an idea of what the update is? Again, this is Nancy McPherson, and she is with the Department of Hawaiian Homeland.
Mahalo for inviting me. So we're passing this out. I got an update from our Land Development Division, Public Works, Richard Spear and Kehaulani Cortero. And they gave us an update about their cesspool assessments and sewer system improvements. So they talked about Hawaii Engineering Group is conducting a neighbor island cesspool assessment with completion by the end of 2024. They're going to do a GIS map showing the status of waste management for each lot and recommended options for upgrading infrastructure to accommodate areas without sewer access. The HHO will be responsible for implementing these upgrades. Then the second project is the Oahu cesspool assessment. It's being conducted under the Fukunaga contract. Fukunaga subcontracted Hawaii Engineering Group to perform a door-to-door survey. So there has been some surveying that being done in your community that's being sponsored by DHHL as well. Fukunaga will compile the findings into a report that suggests upgrades, improvements, or new infrastructure to support areas needing sewer connections. Although a draft report is available, the final report is still pending completion. So as soon as that's finalized, we'll make sure that that gets shared out to you all. But we're also still trying to figure out what the bigger strategy is. So that goes into the sewer system improvements. Our older sewer systems are in Waianae Valley, Nanakuli, Waimanalo, and Papakolea. They require significant upgrades before they can be transferred to the city and county. Currently, sewer improvements are underway in Waianae Valley and Papakolea. The work in Waianae Valley is part of Act 227, with Fukunaga serving as the design consultant for this project. Their contract involves upgrading the sewer systems in Waianae Valley, Nanakuli, and Waimanalo to meet county standards for eventual turnover. These areas, along with Papakolea, have some of the oldest systems and require extensive improvements to reach compliance. So what we have to do is bring them up to current standards, and we convey them to the city and county for operations and maintenance. So that's the ultimate goal. And then for newer subdivisions, it's a different approach. So they're having video cameras go into the sewer lines, and they're working with the city to get feedback on deficiencies. And then we're going to get a consultant to design the necessary improvements. So that's like Princess Kahanu Estates, Waimanalo, and places in Kapolei, homesteads in Kapolei. So now LDD is not involved in securing funding for lessees to convert from cesspool to sewer or septic. But we are working together, so LDD and planning is working together to identify what's needed and develop strategies to obtain funding for implementation. Our next, LDD's next key milestone will be the completion of the final assessment reports by the end of this year, which will offer guidance on the necessary steps to improve how wastewater is managed on Hawaiian homeland. Securing funding for those improvements will be the next challenge. And so on the other side, our planning office update, and Dr. Pollock here, Barry, can talk a bit more about this, but we are working, so it was initiated where Hawaii Rural Water Association worked with Waianae Valley Homestead Community Association to apply for technical assistance from EPA. DHHL has joined in that request, and it will probably be expanded as we go along. Since we have cesspools on pretty much all of our homestead areas, the older ones. And so this project has started, so we're meeting with EPA, Hawaii Rural Water Association, and 3 consulting firms, And we're going to be meeting with the Department of Health, the City and County of Honolulu, actually already have, and USDA Rural Development to discuss ways to potentially fund sewer system improvements, connections to sewer systems for lessees, and conversion of cesspools to septic systems if connection to sewer is not feasible. We're also exploring applying for funding through the Hawaii Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And then there's a couple of links there to more information. And then lastly, Cherie Noel Ka'anana and I have been representing DHL at the city's Stormwater Wastewater Advisory Group meetings, because they're talking about stormwater fees and sewer system fees, and it meets monthly, and we continue to advocate for affordable wastewater rates and environmental justice for our beneficiaries.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Okay, so you mentioned the improvements that's going on in our homestead now, and we all see it. So once you folks dedicate that to the city, there's still more infrastructure that needs to be done, right? Because for say like the streets that are in lower elevation, there's infrastructure that needs to be done there. So the improvements does not necessarily mean that the sewer laterals are now being connected from the city sewer main to the property line. That's going to come later.
Right. Yeah. So on that illustration that you had, you know, the lot line, the lessee is responsible for the improvements within your lots under the terms of your lease. However, we realize that this is a serious situation, and we have some kuleana in this situation. And so we are exploring how to fund constructing those laterals. In some cases there are laterals, but they haven't been used because the lessee chose not to connect many years ago. In some cases there's a gradient problem, so the lot is actually lower than the sewer line in the street, so it's going to have to get pumped up to the street. But because of the soils in this area, there's a serious challenge with doing septic systems for most of the lots that have cesspools. So, but again, we're still gathering information. We're working with Hawaii Rural Water. We're going to have these consultants that EPA is providing to look into all of this and figure out what's the best way. But ultimately, HHL's goal is to try to get as many lessees connected to sewer as possible. But yeah, that's going to be the final step, is actually connecting those homes to the sewer lines.
And then you did mention technical assistance with the EPA. So this is something that Ted Johns has been working with you folks, with EPA, but what it does is it helps us because of our engagement, because of us having these meetings, because of us inviting you folks to this project. It allows the EPA, you folks, Ted Johns, to see that we are engaging, and so therefore, you want to come help us. So this technical assistance is because of what we're doing. We're trying to get a hand out, we're trying to get a foot in the door, we're trying to make it where, you know, like how I always say, when you guys are ready, we want to make sure we're ready.
Well, you actually lit a fire under us, so thank you, mahalo and aloha. Well, by the end of the year, we're going to have the results of the assessments. And then I think Barry can talk a little bit more about the timeline for the technical assistance project. But because we haven't identified funding sources yet, we may have to amend Hawaii revised statutes. You know, we're not sure. But, you know, EPA is willing to work with us and work for you folks. And so it's probably going to be a couple of years, though, I'm thinking, before we have sort of like the strategy to go forward.
I have a question. Okay, so the act was passed in 2017. It's already 2024. 7 years have already passed. In that 7 years, what has the department, the state, the EPA, and the city and county already done to get us ready for this conversion?
I can't answer for the other agencies, but I know that we were somewhat slow to respond, but we have been participating in cesspool conversion working group meetings, which set the priorities. So we did provide input during that process, and there are different bills that are going to be going into the legislature, so we're going to be monitoring that. And then again, it's taking advantage of all the federal money that's being offered right now for community resilience, environmental health, etc. So we just have to figure, and so Gigi Kyrell's been very instrumental in trying to identify what all of those sources are, but it's really mobilizing the department to also get us working with all the other agencies involved, again, we're understaffed, we're trying to hire, folks, and so we're all spread pretty thin, but we know how important this is.
Can you let Gigi know if she can cross someone?
Okay, yeah, I know. No, it's all on the table right now.
I have a question for you. Did you say that the homeowner's responsibility was taken from the clean out to the house?
It's from the lot line.
So the contractor will bring it in from the main sewer line into the property?
Yeah, eventually that's what's going to happen, and what we're trying to do is find ways to assist the lessees in paying for this.
So we're gonna pay for the main sewer line also?
No,
We're
no.
just gonna pay from,
DHHL is paying for the sewer improvements, but then what we want to do is figure out how to get that lateral to your house and whatever other technology is needed.
that's the burden going from that clean out to the house.
Yeah.
That's the part that we're concerned about.
Yes.
And that's why if your sewer line gets plugged up, DHHL is most likely not going to come out and clean it out for you. It's actually the lessee's responsibility to maintain the line from the house to the property line.
So anything inside the property line is not, anything outside is going to be there.
So that's where we need to try to get resources, money, to take that to the house.
Yeah.
So, I have another question. A lot of people don't have money. It's a big burden for all of us as all along. What if whatever resources that the state, federal agencies can give everybody, and we as a whole community, we install everything ourselves?
Become our own contractor, yes.
Yeah, we'd be like our own self-help guys who build their own homes like that. We as a community, whatever money that we can get, there's a lot of people in homes that have all these skills. I came from the construction industry. I sit all my money. I can do it all. But I'm sure the whole community is together, we can all come together and do it ourselves.
I'm not going to say you can't do that or there's no way to do that. I'm just going to say that there might be some challenges with doing that way because the DHHL is a state agency and we're subject to state rules and all of that stuff. But we can definitely look into it. We can look into figuring out a way where we can empower our homesteaders to participate in their own remediation, mitigation. Yeah, okay.
And Uncle, if we cannot do it on outside of the property, we can do it on the inside.
To do it anyway, until we like, they don't bring it to the property. A lot of these houses aren't very far, literally, just actually just gonna go to the cesspool and boom, you're right there already. Come from the house into the cesspool, we're just gonna go from that lateral. Done.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take notes and write all that down. So
So, I have a question. So at our last meeting that we had at Waianae Library, we talked about the septic system. And we talked about different types of septic systems and how every lot is different. So one house might have one system, but the other house might not be able to use that system. And then we also talked about a possibility of if we can still use septic systems, if we can get it by the bulk, and have it go through DPP as part of a model approval. Meaning we would take each model, run it through DPP, have them approve each model. And as these models are approved, if your house needs one model, it's already approved, and we go putting all of the paperwork in, running the permits that might take months. And then my model might be different from yours, but mine is also a pre-approved model. And so that was something that we talked about. And then we also talked about having an engineer, because of course these systems would need an engineer stamp. And one of the suggestions was maybe the department can hire 1 or 2 engineers that would work specifically for the Department of Homeland and the homesteads across the state. And they would just focus on stamping plans. So is that something that you folks have talked to the department about since the last meeting?
I think the challenge has been since the last meeting, Ted Johns looked into this a little bit further, and he said that the soils may not be suitable for septic systems. So, which would have been nice to know before the meeting, because, we spent a lot of time talking about septic systems. However, that doesn't mean that there won't be any possibility of doing it. But right now, I think we're kind of gearing more towards figuring out how to get it hooked up to sewer, because we are spending a lot of money to upgrade that system and get it conveyed to the city.
So we want everybody to look up to the sewer.
Yeah.
And the reason she's saying that, and Ted's findings, is that our soil is not compatible for the breakdown of the waste. If the soil was compatible, then an IWS or septic system would be something that we do. But because the soil is not compatible, that's why they're saying ultimately we'll probably have to go with the sewer. Anybody got? Go ahead, go on.
So, Ted Johns is not the ultimate authority in this. With the department or some other entity be able to hire a consultant, or even do them do their own soil testing? Can we get a second and third opinion on that?
Yes.
It is a big difference.
Yes, we already are, because we're still doing a cesspool assessment study, still finalizing that for Oahu. And now we have the technical assistance from the EPA, and there's 3 engineering firms that are going to be working on this. So we are going to get second and third opinions. And we'll make sure that all the options, whatever is technically feasible, will be part of the solution set. So that's we're making sure we're exploring all options.
And this technical assistance is for us.
It is, yes, it is for Waianae, but that we're also looking at well, we're looking at funding mechanisms for the state revolving fund, which then would be available to lessees statewide. So we are looking at it broadly, but for Oahu, the main discussion, except for out in Waiahole, has been upgrading the sewer lines and connecting all unconnected lessees to the sewer.
Then we had a question over there. Yeah.
Asking her that most of us have our cesspool in our yard. So we're talking connecting from outside to inside, correct? If you have to break down the wall, who's responsible for that after?
Well, hopefully we can figure out a way to not have to break the wall. You know, I've heard that concern at the last meeting, and so, you know, we're noting all of that down, and we're gonna make sure that that's addressed. I can't tell you the answer right now, but we're gonna work on figuring that out. It would make sense if we're paying for the work to be done, that would include repairing any damage to property on the lessee's lot.
My next question, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe when we first got our homes and our contract with Hawaiian Homeland, our cesspool was included to that. Now, we have it for 99 years. We're still paying on it, and then we're gonna have to connect and pay again. What happens? What is Hawaiian Homes gonna do for us?
Well, we'd have to look at your lease and see what the language of your lease is and what the conditions say. That was a long time ago. So I would have to do some research and try to find out what the original agreement was. Back then, no one was anticipating sea level rise or the fact that cesspools wouldn't be something that you could basically use forever. So things have changed, so we kind of need to take a new, fresh look at it.
Nancy, so your statement that you just made that we, the Bell, is paying for the sewer upgrades on the public streets, right? So, lateral, if it is situated to go where there is a wall, could it be placed where the driveway is? You know, so can that lateral be somewhere else other than the wall? I mean, is that being considered as one of the more affordable options?
Well, I know that there may be technical issues with putting a sewer line under a driveway. I remember when I worked on Molokai, you know, a driveway was placed over a sewer line, and then if the sewer breaks, you know, then you've got to break up the driveway, right? So I think we're going to have to look at these on a case-by-case basis. But, you know, I think that we're going to try to find the best solution. The engineers will work with the beneficiaries to find the best solution that works for you folks.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned, you know, Waiahole and doing their cesspools and their sewer lines. A big difference between Waiahole, which is just barely above sea level, and Waianae Valley, right? So when you have the priorities of 1, 2, 3, and 4, is Waianae Valley over an aquifer? And how many feet are we above that aquifer, if at all, opposed to other areas that are literally coastal and within 10, 20 feet above sea level? Because we have some homes on this coast and along the coast of Oahu that may actually be lower than sea level. And to me, what is concerning is Princess Kahana, because they're actually at, if not lower than sea level. So there is that type of comparison and differential. So when we all have the same type of priority, I'm not saying that we do, because I don't recollect Princess Kahana correctly, but it would seem inconsistent for us to have the same priority when we have distinctive differences that should be considered.
Okay, well, what I can do is send you a link to the prioritization report. So I was going to the cesspool conversion working group meetings, and I got to know Dr. Chris Schuler and Mike Metsukato. Mike is now with EPA, and so he's been working with us. He's the one that kind of kept bugging us. You've got to sign up for this, you know, CAWAG initiative for technical assistance. So he's on the East Coast now. He used to be in Hawaii, but Chris Schuler, we're still in touch with him. And so they're the ones who did the modeling and did the research to do the prioritization. So I could send you a link to that so you can maybe understand better what all the criteria were they looked at. I'm not, I can't answer your questions right now. It's pretty technical, but I know they took whatever available data they had and put it together in a pretty rigorous model. And they were researchers with the Water Resource Research Center. And our current head of ENV at the city, Dr. Roger Babcock, was actually, I think, head of that at the time. So Roger knows more about how that whole project was done. But I can definitely get you that report. Waianae is rural, and it's actually quite a bit above sea level, and it's not near a sewer system, city sewer system at all. So, but you guys are. So I think that's one of the things we're looking at DHHL is proximity to existing city sewer.
And that's part of the criteria that determines your prioritization.
I'm not sure. I'd have to I don't have the report with me, so.
Okay, so before you leave, I wanted to ask you if you could share the presentation that you shared with the commissioners. I believe it was last year, maybe January or February, in which it was a home, I think, septic type processing system, which would cost us money to build that, but then that would relieve us from having to connect to the sewer. Now, the commissioners just took a pass on making any determination on it, if I recollect right, but could you just share that with these folks that have not seen that presentation, or at least orally share it with us? Because, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, that's what I want. So could you share that?
Okay, I'll share it with Auntie Jan here, and I was just looking at various alternatives. We've been working with Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations, and they've been very active. They're also working with EPA to do technical assistance and trying to help folks, including DHHL, look at all the different alternatives. So. We're going to keep exploring all those things, but I'll make sure that Auntie gets that and that can be shared.
I got a question again. Money was awarded to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands a couple years ago. That $600 million. Did we get some of that?
Well, the commission developed a strategic plan for the $600 million. And most of it is devoted to new homesteads.
Only a little bit on me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so some of it, a very relatively small amount, is being used for repairs and maintenance.
There you go.
So I will look into that, but as far as I know, that's not in the strategic plan.
Is Nahasa a possible resource when we're talking about rehabilitation
Yes,
and
Nahasa,
repairs?
and Nahasa is a potential resource for doing this.
Hello, that was my question to you about. Well, DHHL is paying for the city sewer to be upgraded. Why didn't the city pay for the upgrade?
That's a really good question, Angie, and the fact of the matter is that it was never conveyed to the city. So originally, back in the day, like Papakolea, the sewer section of the sewer system that ran through Hawaiian Homelands was Hawaiian Homelands' responsibility, and we tried off and on for years to convey it to the city. And at one point there was a big legal problem with that, because normally when you build a development, once it's ready, it's actually dedicated to the city, which means the land goes with it. And because Hawaiian Homelands is inalienable, and you can't do that with Hawaiian Homelands, we had to figure out a way to keep the land, but just convey the actual sewer line and equipment and all of that stuff. And so we finally figured, it took years and years and years just to figure that part out. But now that we figured it out, these systems have aged, and now they need to be upgraded, so we have to spend millions to upgrade them so that the city will take them. And so that's what we're working on right now.
Well, you sure took our sewer fees for us who are, put onto the city. They didn't say no to our sewer fees. So isn't that, accepting responsibility for the sewer? I don't understand that. So then the lateral part, actually, owner responsibility, well, it should be actually DHHL responsibility, shouldn't it? Because knowing that after is that a forced conversion?
Well, I hear what you're saying. The way the leases are written, the lessee is responsible for what happens within the lot. But again, we realize this is a special situation. It was an unfunded mandate that was passed by the legislature. And so now we're all scrambling to figure out how we're going to pay for it.
Well, maybe the legislature can fund it. Will fund it.
Well, talk to your representative.
So I have a reply to Carol's question. And so it's a valid question, and I also think by your comment of the city is taking our money when, we're paying for these sewer charges. Why isn't the city helping to pay for the upgrades? And I think that question should be posed to Dr. Babcock, who's on Zoom. He is with the city and county wastewater, so maybe he has some insight on that.
While we're waiting on Dr. Babcock, I just asked, so now that the department has figured out this legal problem, so every new homestead, once it comes up, that road goes to the county, whichever county it is. Because I've never understood why DHHL had this problem, but when private developers go and build, they don't have problems.
Because they can dedicate the land. So they just dedicate the whole roadway, and it all goes to the city. And the newer subdivisions, we don't have that problem because we're building to city standards, and we're just, and we're working on an MOA with the city, which we need to get that going again, but we haven't finalized it yet, but it was gonna spell out the whole process and actually set timelines, so deadlines for that happening. And so that's what we're working on. We need to get that going with the city again. But yeah, so the newer ones aren't the problem. It's the older homestead subdivisions that we have the challenges with.
I think Dr. Babcock, right?
Can you folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good evening. Roger Babcock, the Director of Department of Environmental Services, which takes care of wastewater and refuse for the city. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there tonight. I'm on the mainland on vacation. Actually, I'm in Texas, but I'm happy to be here. And I have to say that I'm really impressed with how much information you have and how much good information you have and understanding of the issues and the requirements. I just wanted to mention that. The city. There's a lot of different issues here, but just to clarify a couple of things. Any people that are connected to the city sewer system receives treatment of their wastewater by the city, and we have 2,100 miles of sewer that we own and maintain, and 9 wastewater treatment plants, including one at Waianae, and 72 pump stations to help move sewage around to our treatment plants. And so the city is responsible for that entire system, and it's very heavily regulated by the Department of Health and the EPA, and has to meet many, many requirements, including monthly monitoring and recording of all kinds of pollutants and constituents, both in the wastewater coming in, the wastewater that we discharge, and in the environment where we have to do samplings, for example, in the ocean and on beaches. And so it's a very regulated industry, and we have about 1,200 people that work for us, including 150 wastewater treatment plant operators and hundreds of mechanics and other people too. But we only maintain what we own. So we don't maintain, or we can't maintain property that's not ours. And so that has kind of come up a little bit tonight, and I'll come back to that. But the sewer fee is paying for the treatment and disposal and recycling of the sewage. We have and in on-site systems, so any home or business or anything that's not connected to the sewer system is not under the jurisdiction or responsibility of the county. So it falls under the State Department of Health. So all on-site systems, septic tanks, cesspools, aerobic treatment units, or anything that's an on-site treatment and disposal system, in other words, it's not connected to a sewer, is the responsibility of the State Department of Health. It's not DPP, for example. No city agency would have any jurisdiction over that. So just to make sure that that's clear. I wanted to talk about some of the things that we do. So and it's been talked about how development occurs, and there are still a couple of large developments going on right now. For example, Coa Ridge and Ho'opili, where developers come and they build the streets, they build the water lines, they build the sidewalks, they build all of the infrastructure, including sewers, and then they go through a process of turning it over to the city or dedicating and giving it to the city. As part of that process, way back from when they were doing the design, they have to get the design approved by the city to make sure that and they design it according to all its current standards, so that when it's time to turn it over, then that's a very smooth process, and it usually happens soon after it's finished, while it's still new. And the reason for that is once it becomes city property, then the city is going to maintain it and own it forever. And so the city cannot take on stuff that's broken, and because then we have to fix it, and all of the existing ratepayers have to pay for that. So that also brings up something about what we're doing now to expand our system and try and eliminate cesspools. So if the by ordinance, if the city brings a sewer to your street, then you're obligated to connect to it and disconnect from your cesspool or any other on-site system. And then when that happens, then all of that stuff is paid for by the city. So, which means the existing ratepayers, right? So all the other people that are already connected, which is most of the people, then when we do a sewer project, so for example, we have a sewer project now in Ever Beach. It hasn't started yet, but it's a big project. There are 979 cesspools in the neighborhood, the last sort of unconnected neighborhood there within Ever Beach. And it's a $62 million project. And so who pays for that? Well, all the people that are already on the sewer system are the ones who pay for it. And so we all pay for it. And that's just the way it works. And there is some federal money, and that's been alluded to. And you've heard of State Revolving Fund. And so just to make sure you know what that is, that is not free money. It's loaned money. So it's a pool of money that comes from the EPA that the State Department of Health distributes. But it's a loan, so and our project, Ever Beach project, does qualify for that, and it's been approved for that project. So we will get the $62 million, but we have to pay all of that back. So the ratepayers will pay all that over 30 years. So the key benefit of it is that the interest rate is very low. It's only 1.25%. So it's very inexpensive money, but it's not a grant. It is a loan. So that's what state revolving fund is. And we get lots of money in state revolving funds for our projects. And that is very important because it saves the ratepayers money. Because other borrowed money costs about 4%. And that makes a big difference in the long run. So we have quite a few sewer, it's called the Sewer Improvement District Project, which will eliminate cesspools at different places around the island. But just so you know, the cesspool ban is a ban on cesspools. It doesn't obligate the counties to facilitate that. But we are anyway doing quite a bit of things. But we do not have plans in place to take sewers to every resident on the island. That would be very, very expensive, especially in places that are far away from sewers, like
Okay, Dr. Babcock?
shore. So, but we do have plans in place that involve about a little over 2,000 cesspools around the island in different communities.
Dr. Babcock?
As part of 18 different projects.
Linda?
So anyway, that's some information. I'm happy to answer other questions, but I haven't answered one.
So Dr. Babcock, I understand that the cities of Waianae to all of the different situations, all of the different city streets and so on and so forth. And we're glad that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and the city has come to an agreement regarding our streets, knowing that all of these other city streets folks own. Maybe now it's working with the department, it might be a licensing thing, I'm not sure. But the question that I have, and this is pertaining to our homestead, and Kalamai, because a lot of my questions will only pertain to homes. But the question is, we're paying for wastewater in our bill that also comes with our water bill. And so, is there a way to determine, or how is it determined, how is the wastewater bill determined? Is it by the usage of our water, or is it by the usage of our wastewater? And the reason I ask that is because if I am using water in my house to water the yard, that water is not going into the wastewater system. Only the water from my bathroom, from my kitchen, sink, and my laundry is going to go into the wastewater system. So, because city and county owns Board of Water Supply, or runs Board of Water Supply and the wastewater system, is the wastewater part of our bill, does that include the amount of water that we use? And if it does, how do we separate it? Is there a way to separate it so that I'm not charged on my wastewater for the water that I use to water my kalo, or my maki, or my pakalana?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm happy to answer that. So the way the bill is, the sewer bill is generated is as follows. It has two parts. It has a base charge, and then it has a volumetric charge. So the base charge is a fixed number for every residence by what's called an EFU, equivalent single-family dwelling unit. So generally that's one for residents, unless you have two houses property, then two. And the charge for that is variable. It was last increase was in 2017, and it became $77.55 per month for every single family resident. And it has not changed since then. It changed each year before that, over